Hello, and thank you for joining us. Everybody, if you haven't already, go ahead and give the stream a like, say hi in the chat. I'm really excited for our chat today. Real quick, if you like this shirt, you can get it at lucretiareport.com/store. I think it's $19.99 on there. And watch all the way through the chat for a discount code for 10% off of everything on that store at the end. Anyway, we've got another YouTuber on today. She talks about activism, getting out the vote. She talks about how to get out the votes in the Latinx community. She talks about the importance of filling out the census and all kinds of the nitty-gritty things of activism that people they don't make the news, that aren't as sexy as some of the other things. So I'm really excited for our conversation today. We've got Sylvia Salazar of the YouTube channel Tono Latino. Sylvia, hi, how are you?
Hi, Ian. How are you? I'm so excited to be here.
I'm great. Thank you for joining us today. First of all, my audience may not know who you are, but they should. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you do, what kind of content you make, and who you are?
Yes, I'm a Colombian immigrant. I'm a computer engineer turned political activist because of what's happening in our country, especially over the last 4 years. And I noticed after the last election that there was something missing in all these efforts to engage people and get them to be better informed and out to vote. And that was a big, big miss with the Latino community. I didn't see a lot of people talking to the Latino community. And so I kind of took it upon myself to create a media company to increase Latino voter turnout, especially because when all of this happened, I looked at the numbers and saw that Latinos make the largest racial and ethnic minority in the US, but we're the ones that vote the least. So for the last 6 presidential elections, our voter turnout has been below 50%. And we make about 18% of the US population. About 1% of Latinos are in elected positions. So I want to change that. And I think part of the reason, there's a lot of different reasons, and we can talk about them, but part of the reason why the Latino community is not engaged as much is because nobody's talking to them. And I even have data to support that. So here I am trying to do that with my YouTube channel, my platform. And I'm so happy that I got to meet you because somebody that understands the struggle and is kind of going on the same path as I am has been great to find you, honestly.
Well, thank you. If I remember off the top of my head correctly, I think Latinos are also the fastest growing demographic in the United States too. Is that correct?
I believe you're correct. I know that
think so.
that the Asian Americans are also growing pretty fast. So that's why I don't want to give you 100% yes on that one. But Latinos are projected to be about 30% of the US population by, I believe, if the numbers haven't changed, by about 2060. So that's a significant growth.
And it's only not I think in the 2040s or something that we're projected to be a majority minority country, and of course that'll still white people will still be a plurality. So I don't know why people freak out when they hear that. But there's a lot of changes going on, and it's really affecting some of the ways that our politics works. It's maybe one of the most significant long-term political shifts that we're seeing in the country. It's just the growing diversity of the country. Anyway, one of the things that you talk about a lot, Sylvia, is the census. And the census is incredibly important. It makes sure that people get representation. It determines redistricting and makes sure people get funding for roads, for schools, for social services, all of that. And by the way, guys, if you haven't filled out your census yet, you only have until the end of the month to do it at my2020census.gov. So definitely go do that. That is extremely important. But one of the things we're seeing is that the Trump administration has gone through a lot of effort to try to suppress turnout to the census, suppress responses to the census, and especially when we have the pandemic going on, that's so dangerous. One of the things you might remember is that he tried to put the citizenship question on the census, which a lot of people think was to decrease turnout from immigrant communities, which are usually in urban areas, which are usually blue areas. And luckily, that was struck down by the courts. But a lot of people are worried that the damage might already be done, that people are already thinking, oh, well, I heard about the citizenship question. I don't know what they're going to do, what funny business they're going to get it up to. And that people may not complete the census in immigrant communities, even though there's not a citizenship question. And just to be clear, guys, immigration cannot access your census responses. It cannot be subpoenaed. Investigators can't access it. So there's no reason not to fill it out. But I was wondering what your take on that is. Do you think that's going to be a problem we're really going to face? And if so, what can we do about that in the very limited amount of time we have left?
I'm so glad you talk about this because, like you said at the beginning, that the census and a lot of the topics that we cover are not sexy. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
The census is not exciting to a lot of people unless you're a total data nerd. But like you were saying, this is how a lot of things happen in this country, and the census data is critical to distribute both federal and state funds. How we get literally the number of representatives in the House of Representatives. That's how they determine, oh, Oregon needs to have 7 people in the House versus another state that might have, I don't know how many because I haven't done my homework on memorizing numbers of representatives for each state. But
There are 50 of them.
No, I meant like for each state, how many representatives?
I know, that's what I mean. I don't blame you for not memorizing all 50.
Oh, okay. And the other thing is, like you said, how much money each state gets for schools, for hospitals, for the roads that we drive on, for how businesses use the census data to determine where the population is growing, or a lot of different things to see if they're going to open distribution centers or new stores, and that's going to bring jobs. It affects a lot of things, and it happens every 10 years. And unfortunately, the Trump administration for the past 3 years, because I remember reporting this when I first started Tono Latino back in 2017, when they were like, oh, we're going to include a citizenship question. Why? Literally, the census counts how many people, not how many citizens live in the country, how many humans are in the whole land that is considered to be the United States of America. No matter where they came from, no matter what their immigration status is, that has nothing to do with it. And like you said, just the rumor that this might be a thing started spreading around immigrant communities and generating fear, because people that are here without legal status are afraid that by responding to this form, by this questionnaire, somebody's going to find them and they're going to be deported. But like you also said, the government actually has no way to access these individual records for 72 years. It's called the rule of 72 because when they made this, they assumed that people would live around 72 years. So by the time that they were able to look at, your grandparents' responses, then, or whatever, the responses from back then wouldn't matter now.
Mm-hmm.
But the from my point of view and what I have seen, I think the damage is done. A lot of people are afraid. I know there's a ton of organizations. You are trying, I'm trying. Every single Latino nonprofit that I follow, and I follow a lot of them on social media, are pushing people to fill out the census and explain why it's so important. When this started, we didn't have pandemic in our bingo cards. So there might have been a little bit more success if census workers had been able to go door to door to find people, to count them on the census. And the other thing is that the Trump administration shortened the time for the census by a month. So like Ian said earlier, You have until the 30th of this month to fill out your census, when originally it should have been until the end of October. And so that cut down the time to get an accurate count by a month. And there are internal documents that are coming up. I forgot to read the article because I just saw it pop up in NPR earlier today, 2 hours ago, that there is internal reporting from the Census Bureau saying that shortening that time will cause significant errors. And those errors are going to translate into less representation in the House, less money for communities, and it's going to affect people in some serious ways. And this has literally a decade before we can, a decade of implications.
I wonder if there's some standing to sue about that because if I remember correctly, I believe the Constitution's language on the census says an actual enumeration of the population, right? And so I wonder if there would be some standing to sue about if you know that it's going to cause an incorrect enumeration if that's not the actual enumeration, and therefore it's illegal to cut it in ways that would cause that. Um, yeah, it's really disgusting what's happening there, especially when one of the reasons it was shot down by the court was all those documents were released that showed that it was a concerted effort to decrease representation in minority communities. And not to mention that the pandemic is also going to cause an undercounting of houseless people, which are always undercounted in the census.
Mm-hmm.
But that's going to be even worse now. And
Well, and more people are losing their homes right now, and they're going to be
yeah,
in transition. It has so many different variables and problems to aggravate what already was critical.
mhm. Yeah, the COVID-19 and the twin threats of COVID-19 and Donald Trump have really thrown a wrench into just about everything, it seems. One of the reasons that the census is so important is because of redistricting. Obviously, there's a money issue, but I think the main reason Republicans want to sabotage the census is to control redistricting, to have more Congress people in Republican states, fewer in Democratic states, and whoever the reason that's so one of the reasons that's so important is because of gerrymandering. Gerrymandering has been really bad in the last 10 years ever since Republicans had big victories in 2010 and then they used computers to gerrymander surgically, as one of the courts in New Hampshire actually said, with surgical precision. And the only way to reverse that is to win state legislatures. And so it's not all about the White House. It's not all about Biden versus Trump. It's up and down the ballot at every level. We have to get progressives, we have to get Democrats winning. And so, what do you think are the best ways that we can make sure the Democrats win state legislative seats, where in 41 states the state legislatures will control redistricting, not to mention that they'll be able to expand Medicaid, pass gun safety laws, all of those things? What do you think are the most important things we can do for that?
That's a really good question. And I think you addressed it beautifully when you said this is not just about the White House. I get I don't know, frustrated, sad, depressed when people don't understand how much power a local election has, because that's where a lot of the changes happen. And we tend to dismiss local elections. We don't pay up as much attention, but they actually affect us way more than the big elections. And like you said, that's where the change happens. So we do need to pay attention to who is in our state legislature and take the time to vote. One thing that I find extremely frustrating is how much effort the Republican Party puts into making it very difficult for people to vote. Um, because
I've got a video coming out about that on Saturday.
you can say a lot of things about Latin American elections and we have our own problems. But for example, in Colombia, and I can only speak about my country, um, you're automatically registered to vote when you turn 18 and you're a Colombian citizen. And we vote on a Sunday where most people have the day off. Not only that, but unless things have changed, there's, I don't know what this is called in English, but there's no alcohol sales for like 48 hours before an election to make sure
Mm.
people are theoretically sober at the time of voting. And so for me, I mean, I understand why things were done back in the day when people had horse and carriage, that you had to vote on a Tuesday. But the fact that this continues to happen and that it's not a federal holiday and that people might lose their jobs if they go vote, it's absolutely bizarre to me.
Mhm.
And so, of course, people are just going to be like, okay, maybe I'll take the time every 4 years to go vote, or just ignore the smaller elections because they can't take the time to do it. I've been very spoiled because when I became a citizen, I moved to Oregon. We all vote by mail. It is the easiest, most wonderful thing to receive your package with the information pamphlet and your ballot, and you just sit in your kitchen and you read and you fill it out, and you're not in a rush, and you do take your time, and then you just go drop the ballot in a special location, or you send it back in the mail. Um, I do think the good thing now is that a lot of people are paying a lot more attention to elections and to the news. We've seen, for example, all the outrage with the Postal Service, um, which is unfortunate what's going on, but thankfully people are paying attention. And it is a great opportunity to have those discussions about how important local elections are and tie it every 10 years to, hey, we need more people that will protect, that we need more people in government that represent the communities that they are legislating over. Um, and we need people to work with those communities and not try to screw them over to get a certain group more power than they should have, et cetera. And so we have a great opportunity, especially this year with everything, to have more conversations about the importance of local elections. And okay, we all know who Donald Trump and Joe Biden are right now. Like, I think that's done. But we do need to invest the time to do more homework on who are our local representatives and why we would prefer a certain person over another, for example.
When I was in high school, and apparently some people think I still am, I got that comment once. But when I was in high school, I had a part time job working for the county elections administration, and I only worked on election nights, which many people would be surprised was like 3, 4 times a year. Um, it would be school boards or aldermen or whatever in the county. And I think that one thing that's been helping with this is that more attention has been brought to especially local races ever since the Black Lives Matter movement was put in public focus again, and people have been focusing on district attorneys, sheriffs, mayors, police chiefs, um, all these local officials that have power over policing and criminal justice. I think that that's been good for getting attention to down ballot races. Also, I think there has been a lot of effort by the Democratic establishment to bring attention to these issues. Um,
Moms Demand Action. You've probably seen that group, right?
what's that now?
Moms Demand Action.
I have, yes, the gun safety.
They are, yes. So they were founded by an activist called Shannon Watts. This happened, unless I'm mistaken, this happened right after the shooting in the elementary in Connecticut.
Mhm. Sandy Hook.
There, the names wasn't coming to me, but they focus specifically on local groups and grassroots local activism, and they have amazing statistics of how much change has been made through these groups in the local governments. Not something that gets all the media attention, prime time on all the major channels, but local things that make a huge difference to exactly what you said, like who you elect as you know attorney general, sheriff, the gun regulations for each state have changed thanks to the work from these smaller groups at a local level.
Yeah, it's really they really are some of the most important elections because the biggest change, like you said, happens at smaller levels. While Congress might be all balled up, and the House is passing 400 bills that get thrown in Mitch McConnell's wastebasket, city councils and state legislatures, and there's even a lot of non-legislative bodies like sheriffs and district attorneys that are making change every single day. And next week, we're going to have a candidate for the Texas state legislature on, who I'm going to talk to this about. But you don't know who your state representatives are, or your state representative candidates are. You definitely need to. And before you go in to vote, before you fill out your ballot, make sure you look up who's going to be on that. Because there may even be some nonpartisan races that you may go in there thinking, okay, I'm just going to vote for all the Democrats. But then you go in there, oh, the city council is nonpartisan. Who should I vote for here? Make sure you know who on that list is going to be doing good things. Who's going to be, put giving body cameras to the police. Who's going to be putting more money into the schools? Who's going to be fixing your roads? Who's going to be taxing the big houses that they're building on the hill over there so that they can put it into the sidewalks that are falling apart outside of your house?
I like to look these, because obviously I don't know if it works the same, for example, in Texas, but here in Oregon, like I said, we receive like a huge booklet with all the information.
I've heard
What I like, and I read those things, but who writes those things? Well, the candidate and their PR team. So obviously it's going to sound good. I love looking those people up on Twitter and seeing what they tweet and what they retweet and what they follow, because then you will see more of the real candidate. And that's something that I use to choose who I'm going to vote for. Like who's going to be, like, for example, in the recent Oregon primary, in the running for judges, because those are nonpartisan positions, I'm like, I'm going to look these people up, and social media is super useful because then you get to see beyond whatever script that they put in the little book or whatever looks good on their website. You see more of like exactly where they stand depending on what they tweet and retweet on social media.
Yeah, shifting topics a little bit. We both create independent progressive media, and speaking for myself, one of the reasons I started doing this is because the right-wing media infrastructure is so pervasive. You got Fox, Sinclair, Breitbart, even things like the Babylon Bee and the Daily Wire, Jordan Peterson, all of those that have millions and millions of viewers and YouTube subscribers and readers and Twitter followers and all that. And they can even drive the the mainstream media narrative. They can prop up candidates. They're so pervasive, so disciplined. And we don't really have anything like that on the left. We have, we have smaller outlets. We have crooked media and stuff but none of them have the size. There's not as much progressive media out there. And so I wanted to do my small part to fill in that gap. And you're doing a similar thing. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the future of progressive media, and how do we counteract the propaganda machine that the right is churning out all the time, not just here, but all over the world?
It's interesting that you asked that because I didn't have that intention when I started. I for me, my brain didn't do what yours did of like, oh, there's this right-wing propaganda machine on the right. How do we counteract that? We definitely need to start somewhere. And you started the Lucretia Report. For me, it was a little bit different because I just needed a way to inform Latinos of what was going on, and especially talk to them about something besides immigration, because most of the time Latinos get ignored. If they're not getting ignored, the only thing people seem to talk to us about is immigration, even though we care about a lot of other issues. And at first, I was really, like I said, I'm not a journalist. So I was trying to create this very middle of, like, not even progressive. I wasn't going for progressive at all, to be honest. I was trying to create something very just in the middle of the road of like, this is what's going on. And it didn't feel right. And so thankfully, one of my mentors, I want to say he coached me and gave me kind of like, I want to say the permission to be me, because I was struggling with things like science. I mean, I'm a computer engineer. Science is important for me. I believe in science, numbers, data, investigation, everything. So whenever you have somebody from the far right that doesn't believe in science, then my brain doesn't know what to do with it. Because I'm like, well, you're saying the earth is flat. Like, I can't even, like, there's no point in arguing this. Like, what am I supposed to do? And so he's amazing, was like, Sylvia, you're just not feeling genuine, and you're not coming across as yourself because you have this internal struggle. Why can't you just stand for what you believe in and just stand your ground with your beliefs, and it's perfectly fine. You are not Reuters, you're not Associated Press, you don't have to be in the middle. And so when I decided to go with what my beliefs were, which were very much like what you were saying, more progressive, this huge weight fell off my shoulders. And I have that same frustration that you have, because it is very difficult. This is like a David and Goliath fight. It's like, you have, even if just ignore the Breitbarts and the crazy channels, Fox News is a propaganda machine.
Fox News
And
is the
it's
biggest cable channel out there.
exactly, with, is it either Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson has like the most watched cable news show.
One
And
of those
all
two.
these people do is misinform people in the most insane way possible. I mean, you can take any story you want, but this year, let's just talk about how they treated coronavirus. And they said same things as Trump did, like this was all a
People have
hoax.
literally died because of how they treated coronavirus.
Exactly. And I find it infuriating that there's no governmental entity that has a way to regulate what somebody with that level of viewership can say. And how, I mean, like you said, there's thousands of people have died because they were told that this wasn't a problem, and that there was that this was all made up, that this was all a hoax, that this was a flu. And I think it's extremely irresponsible to let this go. I'm extremely frustrated with Facebook, because of the way they refuse to step in, and how little they will censor manipulated media. I mean, this week we've seen how Republican leaders, these people have been elected by voters. Steve Scalise tweeted out manipulated video of, I mean, Adi Barkan. I don't know if everybody here knows, but Adi Barkan is an activist who suffers from ALS. He can no longer talk, so he talks via a computer. Somebody on the right manipulated what he was saying in an interview with Joe Biden and made it sound like Joe Biden was all for defunding the police. And they manipulated Adi Barkan's voice and then created a video that Republican leaders tweeted out.
This man is the House Minority Leader. He's one of the highest ranking members of that party.
Wasn't he, I just want to know if I have the right person. Wasn't he the man that unfortunately was shot by that crazy person that started shooting at members of Congress?
He? Oh, at the baseball game. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know off the top of my head.
If anybody in the listening wants to tell us in the chat, I think like David Beasley in the chat would know, but it doesn't matter who he was. I just wanted to connect the two to see if it was the same person. But how is this person not getting some sort of punishment for doing this? Like, you're literally misleading people, and you know you're doing it. You know that you're doing it. And it is so frustrating. It's like fighting. Oh, see, I knew. David knew. He says that's correct.
Thank you, David.
you're awesome. It just, it's frustrating. And it's like you're the little kid in the playground and you have a bully that just keeps beating you up and you have no idea what to do. But here's where I think you are a little YouTube channel. I'm a little YouTube channel. We will get, I mean, Crooked Media is a little bit bigger than us. But I think we can make a difference if we just keep going. We can keep going, and people are, I know that a lot of people are sorry for voting for Donald Trump. I'm trying not to be angry with all of them, to be honest, because I've seen how much people have suffered with what's going on. But I know that some people just honestly believed in his lies, and they are now very sorry. And we're starting to see a lot of them come out. Like, what's his name? Miles. He's on my Twitter feed.
Miles Davis.
Yes, the one that created Repair, Republicans against. I don't know. It's like another one, Republicans against
There's
Trump.
Several. There's Republican
coalition, but it's called
Trump,
Repair.
Project, obviously.
Yeah. Yes. So I think we can't let the size of those people intimidate us. They have an unfair advantage. There is documentation about how, for example, Breitbart gets special privilege, like special treatment from Facebook, that when they put out manipulated things
as a trusted news source on Facebook.
So is Breitbart. And then when they screw up, somebody up in the upper echelons of Facebook behind the scenes cleans up whatever warnings they got. And so they get a clean slate. And the Facebook employee who reported this last month got fired. So we know they get special treatment. We know they have special powers. But I think I want to be like a typical, optimistic Pollyanna. And maybe that it's just stupid, but it's the only way I can live and have hopes for the world. I think people are just not going to put up with it.
Awesome. So we have a question from the chat real quick before we get into our game. Let's answer that real quick. Joel Hinojosa asks what our opinions on the Electoral College are. I'll give mine real quick. I think that the Electoral College is incompatible with democracy. If you look at Wyoming versus California, for instance, because it's mostly because of the Senate, obviously, but also because of the perhaps too small number of representatives. But if you look at Wyoming versus California, a person in Wyoming has something like 3.7 times as much power in the Electoral College as a person in California does, which is inherently undemocratic. And all of the arguments, I made a whole video debunking this, I've written about things debunking this, all of the arguments against it are just not true. Or in favor of it, are just not true. One of them is that it says you have to go to every state. Donald Trump only went to like 26 states in 2016, the general election in 2016, and half of them was like 4 states. Because why would you go to Mississippi? Why would you go to California? We know how those are going to go. You go to Ohio, you go to North Carolina. And so I don't think that it's likely we'll get an amendment anytime soon. Maybe the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which you should look up. We don't have that much time to get into it. But I think that it's inherently undemocratic, incompatible with democracy. Joel, is that about what you're thinking, Sylvia?
Well, you said it so beautifully. I don't think I would have been so eloquent in my explanation. I just, again, as a foreigner, I will never understand how the majority of citizens in a country can vote for one person, but somebody else gets the presidency. Like, it doesn't matter how much you explain this to me, that will never make sense. Forget it. No. And funny that you mentioned the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. I have a video that all I need to do is edit it, explain this entire thing.
Make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell for that.
Yes. Explaining the Electoral College, and explaining to people the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which is gaining more and more momentum, let's say, with time. So maybe in our lifetimes, or maybe by the time my child reaches college, she's 5, we could see something. I just find it extremely frustrating. I mean, I was looking up the numbers today. No Republican has won the popular vote since 1992, with the exception of 2004.
Yep. So
How, like, explain that to me.
Bush lost it, and then Bush won it the one time.
Yeah.
Obama's, then Trump lost it, and Trump is extremely. Even if Trump wins the election this year, which could happen, he is extremely unlikely to win the popular vote. So that streak is not likely to change this year.
Yeah.
Let's get into our game. If you haven't watched our last stream, halfway through each of these, we tried to do a game kind of like bar trivia, but about the issues. And one of the things Sylvia has made several videos about, talked about a lot, is gerrymandering. So we've got a game about gerrymandering today. Are you ready, Sylvia?
I'm nervous.
All right. All right, so our first question. It is imperative that we flip as many state legislatures as possible this year. And one reason why that is so important is to prevent gerrymandering, which we talked about earlier. People have come up with some really gross districts. So let's see if you can tell me which one of these is not a real congressional district.
You're asking me or the audience?
You can try to guess. Or
oh boy,
you know the answer.
Okay, audience, I need your help, because
well.
these games make my brain shut off.
All right, can you and the audience both see that? I don't think the audience can.
It says, okay, I can now. Oh, okay, these are really funky looking.
I'm not sure if the audience can see that. I'm not sure what the issue there is.
Not yet. I think there's a delay.
Maybe. Okay. I'm not seeing it on my Streamlabs anyway, but...
You're not?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
One quick then. Do you know which one of these is not a real congressional district? And I'm going to try to figure this out while we do that.
You want me to answer? Okay. So just for everybody on the chat, give us a thumbs up if you can still hear us. Ian has 5 crazy maps up on the screen. And
I'm gonna try to create a new window capture for you guys.
Okay, they can hear, so that's good. So they're giving us a thumbs up, which is good. I'm going to describe the congressional maps because this is going to help calm me down. So there's A. A looks like a little rabbit with sunglasses on, running away from an electrocuted mouse. District B looks a little bit like a snake on drugs. District C looks like it looks like the outline, like if you put a drawing and then you do the spray paint around something, looks a little bit like a bat opening his wings. That's District C. District D looks like Medusa. And District
up, by the way, guys, I'm trying to figure this out right now.
Okay, District E looks like a mom running in the streets, dragging a dog. So those are the districts. Oh, you're moving something.
Ian. I'm trying to bring it up as an image, but I clicked on the wrong button there.
Okay, so you're getting close. Okay, for everybody watching, there is so much stuff to control in the back end for a YouTube Live. It's no joke.
There we go. Can you guys see that now?
Yes, there. Just make it. Can you make it a little bit smaller? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You see? Okay. Do you like my descriptions of the
Great job.
districts? I'm sorry, but I think my Medusa description was spot on. I'm going to say that Medusa is not a district.
I'm sorry, which one was
D.
Medusa?
D is
District D?
C. Yes.
District D is not a real district. District D is actually one of the face huggers from the movie Alien.
Woohoo! See,
um,
I said District A was like a rabbit wearing
mhm.
sunglasses with an electrocuted mouse. B was the like the snake on drugs. C was the vampire with his wings open. D was Medusa, and E is a mom running, dragging a puppy.
I think it was honestly maybe more fun the way we did it.
Okay, so I won a point. Yay!
Yay!
I'm excited.
Okay, let me stop the share and see if you guys can see that again. All right, you can see me, me and Sylvia again, right? Good.
No, you have the image on top. Oh, there we go. There.
Great.
Works.
All right, I'm sorry for those technical difficulties, guys. But how crazy is it that the other 4 of those were real districts?
Just.
Anyway, getting on to our next question. Swing Left, a progressive PAC, is targeting 10 states to flip their state legislatures so that Republicans will not be in control of them for redistricting. That's Arizona, Iowa, Texas, North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and Michigan. If you live in one of those states, they're the most important ones to make sure that you get those down ballot races taken care of. How many seats in the House of Representatives, according to some hypothetical maps, could Democrats gain from fair redistricting in these states? Is it 5, 9, or 16 seats?
16 is my favorite number, so I just have to go with 16.
It is 16 seats, which is an incredibly high number. Bonus question, that's more members than the House than the entire congressional districts of which of these states? North Carolina, Michigan, New Jersey, or Massachusetts?
Okay, repeat the question again. Hold on. I was celebrating my 16, my victory.
16 seats is more than the entire congressional district of which state? North Carolina, Michigan, New Jersey, or Massachusetts?
Okay, people in the chat, I need your help. I don't know why I want to say Michigan.
This one might be a trick question. You want the answer?
Does anybody in the chat want to say? Rebecca's saying Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. We got a guess for Massachusetts. We got a guess for Michigan. All right. The answer, insanely, is all of the above. That is more not.
David again. David is on fire. David, I like you. I need you to subscribe to my channel too, because you're very good.
That is not combined, but individually, that is more congressional seats than any of those states have in their entirety.
I have a question for the audience.
Right.
Do you guys know about Vote Forward? Because Ian's mentioned Swing Left.
I've actually written with Vote Forward before.
Awesome. Okay. If you don't know, Vote Forward is an organization that's working with Swing Left where you can sign up to write letters to voters in key states, especially the states and the districts that Swing Left is targeting. And it's super simple. Like, for example, you just write a letter, you print it out, and you handwrite some parts saying like, hi, my name is Sylvia, and I vote in every election because for me, it's really important to exercise my right to vote. And this election could be the most important one in our lives, blah, blah, blah. And then you sign and you send. And hopefully you convince somebody to participate in the election. The tests that they've done show that it increases voter turnout, and it's something you can do no matter where you are. So if you're a little blue dot in a red state, or if you're blue dot in a blue state, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do anything here to help out, you can do it by sending letters to voters. So I just had to do this.
I got some people before, back when you could still have people come to your house. I got some neighbors to come to my house, and my wife and I and this our neighbor couple, collectively we wrote like 500 letters to Florida or something like that.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. Finishing up with our last two game questions. I'm gonna skip that one because it is a picture, and we had not bad luck with that last time. And go to our last question. In 2010, Republicans had big victories, winning state legislative races all over the country and allowing them to create some of the most egregious examples of gerrymandering in American history. How many state legislative chambers did they flip, and how many of those chambers do we still need to win back? Give me a roundabout.
I know. I don't.
Anyone in the audience know?
That is a really good question, and that's just
It's a
you know what
lot of states.
I'm gonna make a confession. I was not paying attention to what was happening in the world or this country in 2010. I was like,
I was 14.
Don't make me feel old. You're not allowed to do that. Don't make me feel like a grandma. But like, just seriously, I was like, oh, these people know what they're doing. I honestly wasn't paying attention. And
Insanely?
now I just want to pull my hairs out. I honestly don't even, I'm going to say something and it's going to be horrible. I don't have recollection of filling out the census. I think I did it because nobody came to my house. And I
sure
don't have anything.
Probably did it for me. Yeah, insanely, the answer was 20 state legislative
oh my God.
Republicans flipped, and we still need to win back 12 of them. We've only flipped 8 of them back. Some of those were like New York. They flipped, I think, one or both of the chambers in New York. It was insane how big of a sweep that was, but we need to have just as big a sweep in the other direction here. Make sure you fill out your census. Make sure you get those state legislative seats taken care of. It is so incredibly important. Well, Sylvie, you've won the game.
I won because I am like 2 out of the 4 questions.
You got the 16.
And one.
You guessed the correct district. We skipped one of them because I don't want to do
all of the above. I missed. David gets that point, but David's on my team, so I get that one. Yay!
Yeah. Congratulations, Sylvia. Your prize is a point. The points.
Thank you.
Nothing. But
it's okay. Gamification for me. That's all I need. I just need the recognition that I won. That's it. Gives me happiness.
All right. Well, moving on. We talked earlier. You mentioned how whenever people talk to Latinx people about political issues, they almost always want to jump to immigration. And so but not every Latinx person is an immigrant, and other issues matter to Latinx people. So I want to ask you why you think that's a problem, and what other issues you think are most are most important to Latinx people. And then, because you are an immigrant, I wanted to ask you if there are any issues that you think do span across the entire immigrant community, and not just Latinx immigrants, but because there are other countries, but Chinese immigrants, Indian immigrants, but immigrants in general. Is there anything that's important to all of those communities, in your opinion?
Okay, that was a lot of questions, and I already forgot the order. So remind me which one you want me to answer first.
Why is it a problem that people only talk about immigration in regards to the Latinx community, and what other issues are important? And are there any issues that you think span the entire immigrant community, not just Latinx, but all?
Yeah. So when we first started talking, I mentioned how I started Tono Latino because I was extremely frustrated about Latinos getting ignored in a lot of the conversations. And I saw that because, like, for example, in the Women's March in 2017, you saw a lot of groups, older groups like Move On, get a lot of new recruits and new life, new groups formed like Indivisible, and a number of other groups. Like, everybody became a political activist. It was like every other week you were going to brunch and then to protest something. But the Latino community wasn't part of those conversations. Very few of these websites had any content in Spanish, things like that. And then, like I said, I started doing some digging. And as I did digging, I found out how little our Latino voter turnout was. Unfortunately, below 50% for the last 6 presidential elections, even though we make a significant portion of the population. This year, we're estimated to have 32 million eligible voters. But if less than 16 million of them vote, like, hello, and we know that every single vote counts. So I did more digging, and then time went by. Prior to the 2018 midterms, the New York Times had a story come out that said that there was a nationwide poll with Latino voters, and over 50% of them said that no political campaign had contacted them at all. Not in person, not by email, not by text, not by smoke signal, no, nothing. Like,
That's insane,
nobody.
considering how many texts I'm getting from Joe Biden and Democratic campaigns and volunteers right now.
And so it just shows how a lot of people just ignore the Latino community, and they just think of them as like a last resort. And I cannot understand why. Now with like, oh, we need to engage Latinos, and so they will take a regular ad and they will put some Spanish speaker on top, and they check mark, and they're like, oh, we're done. Or they put their website through Google Translate and they think that's a good job. And you're like, no, that doesn't say anything. That Spanish is robotic. That is really not human Spanish. That's incorrect. That's full of mistakes. Even, for example, I know there was a reporter from Politico when we still had like 20 something Democratic candidates for presidency, that went and evaluated every single one of their websites. I believe Pete Buttigieg's website was one of the best ones. So that's good. But for example, Elizabeth Warren, love the woman, but she had a button on her website that was like, count me in. And somebody translated that literally, count me in. And it was like, that does not translate to Spanish as you can count on me or like sign me up. That doesn't translate. So all of those things were big misses. And all it does is, it's annoying. It's like, well, you didn't even bother hiring a translator to try to get me to understand what you stand for. So you know what? Forget about it. It's just, and I don't know if it's because they associate Latinos automatically with immigrants, that they think the only thing that they can talk about, or like the most pressing issue, is immigration. And if you think about it, well, yeah, it's an important issue, of course. But if you're a citizen, that means you can vote, and then your immigration status is not in jeopardy. So one thing that affects all of us, and now even more because we're in the middle of a pandemic, is healthcare. Like, the fact that we have
Latinx people get sick too.
Yes. And in this pandemic, Black and brown people are getting sicker and dying way more than other races and ethnicities, because they tend to be poor. They tend to be in, living in close quarters with other people, so they get exposed.
Frontline
they tend to be
jobs,
essential workers.
Things like
They have less
diabetes and
protections.
asthma, they're linked to the environments they're living in.
Exactly. And so there was a report, I think, that came out yesterday about how much we know that children aren't affected by coronavirus as much as adults, but the proportion of Black, Indigenous, and other minorities of color, that their children are dying at a disproportionately high rate compared to white children. So if you want to,
the same thing that's happening with adults, that Black and brown people are dying.
Exactly. Yes.
High rate.
And so one thing that definitely keeps coming up in all of the surveys that I read is affordable healthcare. And it goes in a lot of different ways that we wouldn't even think. So before I even thought about making what has turned into Tono Latino, what got to me was the travel ban and the raids by ICE, because I started seeing a lot of news of Latino families, like Latino parents that didn't want to take their children to their checkups at the doctor because they were afraid that they were going to get deported. Children didn't want to go to school because they were afraid to come home and find out that their parents weren't there. And so you have this crossover of immigration, education, and healthcare in those situations. And that, I don't know, as a new mother, this just really stirred up something inside of me that I was like, no, 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 no. I understand that some people are here without documentation, but they still have rights. And the problem is that they don't know the rights that they have because they don't speak the language and they don't have anybody to explain to them that they are allowed to say, hey, I want a lawyer, or that they should prepare certain documents like a special power of attorney to give to somebody to take over their children while they're detained, things like that you would think like, oh, these people need to know this independent of their immigration status. There's things that they should know and they didn't know, and they didn't have access to this information. And so when immigration started going into the whole children aren't going to the doctor, if they're getting sick, they're not being taken care of because these people are afraid that they're going to get deported, that really got to me. So if you think about it, even before the pandemic, affordable healthcare is something that a lot of people would consider necessary. And right now, it's just in every possible highlighter, like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, we need this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said a lot of heavy things. That's
Sorry.
No, sorry, just talking about those ICE raids and all that really gets to you. And it really drives home the point of why we need to make sure that people are engaged. Why we need to make sure that people think that, oh, politics doesn't affect me. Who's the president? Who's the senator? Who's the governor? Doesn't affect me. And it does. It affects every one of us every single day. And even if you don't think it does, you're going to government schools. You're driving on government roads. You're going to get Social Security one day. And I think the reason that I'm so interested in politics is because to me it's the most important issue in the world. It's the most important thing in the world because at the end of the day, government determines how people live. Governments can do anything. They don't do everything they can do because, democracy and norms and all that are being continuously eroded over the last 4 years. But theoretically, governments could do anything. And we need to make sure that they're doing the right thing. Because we've seen how they can do the wrong thing and how many people can be hurt. So we've seen 160, 170, 80,000 people dead now because the government didn't do the right thing.
I think we're over 185,000 for the official count. Yeah.
It honestly gets too depressing to look at it every.
It does.
Wars happen when governments do the wrong thing. Kids get put in cages when governments do the wrong thing. But when governments do the right thing, people get health care. People get good schools. So government can go really, really wrong, or it can go really, really right. And that's why and government's ruled by politicians. In our system, elected politicians are the people who decide whether it goes really, really wrong or really, really right. So it's so important that people understand that and they realize how critical that is. And so I guess my last question for you as we get to the end is, of all the things we've talked about today, what do you think is the most important thing for someone to take away from this?
Well, I think you just said it. I mean, there's nothing more important than politics. What I would say, back to our earlier conversation about progressive media and things like that, anybody on the call would probably think of like, oh, there's Spanish media, Telemundo and Univision. And unfortunately, I find them extremely frustrating because of a number of reasons. And one of them is they're very sensationalist and they're very much driven by clickbaity content. And they are educating people, but not as much as I wish they did. And also, they're very old traditional media of like people sit and watch the news at a specific time on our TV. But I mean, I'm much older than you are, Ian, but it's still, I do not sit and watch the news on a TV. I get everything either streamed or online. So we need to reach a different generation with different platforms. And I don't see Latino media doing that right now. And there's back to my point about making this, the whole issue with Latinos not voting is extremely problematic. And I want to show them how, even if they don't vote, they're already saying something. And that's something that I put in my Instagram bio that is on my website. Is like, whether you vote or not, you're still saying a lot. You're still saying something. Not voting is like, oh, you know what? I'm okay with whatever other people decide.
It's endorsing the status quo.
Exactly. So
I used to have a job canvassing, and I remember talking to these people once, and we weren't even canvassing. We were canvassing for donations, not even for voters. But I remember talking to these people who were saying they don't vote, and I go, "Do you like the way things are right now? Do you like how the world operates right now? You don't? Okay, well, you know how you change that? You vote. That's step one. It's not the final step, but it's step one. You got to start there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
And even if you can't vote, like for example, in our household, I guess my daughter's a citizen, but she can't vote. She's too young. The only person that can vote is me. My husband cannot vote. That doesn't mean that he cannot do certain things, be politically active in other ways to get people to vote. He can talk to his friends and say, hey, I registered to vote. Hey, let me talk to you about X and Y issue. Let's have a conversation and encourage people to vote. And there's a number of other different things that non-citizens can do to get politically active.
Yeah, well, thank you for talking to us, Sylvia.
This was so much fun.
Before we go, how can people follow you? Where can they find you? Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff?
Yes, I am Tono Latino, TONOLATINO, here in YouTube. And on Instagram, just go to tono.latino and you will see my face with the little logo in the back. And I'm also on Twitter, but that one is con, like with, Tono Latino.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So everybody go follow her, subscribe to her YouTube channel, follow her on Instagram. If you haven't already, like the stream and subscribe down below. Thank you so much for joining us. I told you I'd give you a coupon code at the end, so that's going to be TLR Live. I don't know if all the caps matters, but it's all caps. And that'll be active till next week. Next week, we're going to have Jennifer Skidonenko on. She's a candidate for the Texas House of Representatives running in the Texas's 106th House District. So we're really excited about that. Everybody go subscribe to Sylvia. I
think you need to show them your t-shirt again so they know what they can go get at
go ahead and buy this t-shirt here. We have this and many others. I think this is
Love it.
On LucretiaReport.com/store. We have that and a lot of other things on there. Do you have a store?
Not yet, but I am working on one. So go to store.tonolatino.com and you can sign up to get notified when the store comes out. And 8% of the sale will go to one of several nonprofits, including Fair Fight 2020, Voto Latino, the NAACP, Raíces Texas, March for Our Lives, and I forgot the sixth one right now. Oh, Sunrise Movement.
That's so cool. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much for coming on, Sylvia. And I'll see y'all next week. Bye. And then it'll be a second. I'm watching and waiting for the lag. In stream.